There's really been a shift from what was a focus on MQLs or even opportunities to looking at the full funnel of what is the ROI of any given marketing investment. Even if you're facing a 12 to 18 month sales cycle, there's still that question of, for dollars in, what do we get out at the end?
Hello, welcome to another episode of our series, Accelerate Interviews, where we speak to expert SaaS leaders about the latest marketing trends. Here, I'm really pleased to introduce Richard Conn from Auditboard. You've got a wealth of experience in your CV, 8x8, Ring Central, even LinkedIn, board member and Google in way back when. So loads of great experience, and now really pleased to be speaking to you. How are you, Richard?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, brilliant. No, pleasure. It'd be great if you could just start telling us a bit about you, your journey, and obviously Auditboard and your role there as well.
Yeah, of course. So I'll start with myself. I've been in digital marketing for about 17 years now. Did my MBA at Oxford University, and then started my career really at Google, learning the ins and outs of paid search. And from there, I grew to roles on the agency side, the publisher side, and the client side. For about the past 8 years, I've been in B2B SaaS at a couple of larger companies like Ring Central, 8x8, and Auditboard. My role at Auditboard is to really head up their demand gen team. Auditboard is a B2B SaaS platform. We create software for audit risk, ESG, and InfoSec management. We're used by about 50% of the Fortune 500, and we were recently acquired for over $3 billion by HD Capital. So one of the largest software acquisitions of the year.
Congratulations. Yeah, that must have been an amazing achievement.
Yeah, it's very exciting times and lots of good stuff ahead of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. So, tell me a bit more about your marketing approach there. What is your approach at Auditboard specifically? What are you focusing on at the moment? What's working? What isn't?
Absolutely. So, I think Auditboard has always been extremely customer centric, and that focus on being embedded within the audit community and now into the InfoSec and bar parts of the organization has always been core to our marketing programs. And so we take a very holistic approach and we try to engage with people at all stages of the funnel and really build trusting, meaningful relationships as a way to help drive engagement and drive sales. And so at the top of the funnel, we're focused on thought leadership and account penetration, doing things like content syndication, white paper, ebooks, thought pieces. Middle of the funnel, that's where we start to focus on generating MQLs and transitioning people over from a marketing conversation to a sales conversation. And then at the bottom of the funnel, we focus on kind of surrounding the buyer group and pulling in economic decision makers so that we can progress opportunities to the closed won stage in a quicker fashion.
Brilliant, yeah. And how do you factor that in with them retention? How do you keep sort of getting that flow back round?
Yeah, post-acquisition, there's a little bit of a handoff. First, there's the integration onboarding team, and it really goes to kind of the customer experience side. And they really run the leadership on the retention side of the equation. Marketing has a role, though, in continuing to engage with our customers. So we do customer marketing of providing webinars and CPE credits and education about what's happening within the industry and within their space that's relevant to their roles. To, again, maintain that trusting partnership. We always want to be giving back to the community and through that, continue the engagement with both prospects and our existing customers.
Yeah, absolutely. You've just got to keep it's just continuous nurturing. I think it's so old-fashioned to have that we've converted them, but I almost want to take convert out of the funnel because it's not. It's just that continual nurturing. And I think, for the place we're in at the moment economically, people are very wary about spending. that means that there's such an emphasis on retention, and also there's such an emphasis on patience in marketing, because you have to invest in this longer sales cycle, right? People get fixed on marketing quick wins, quick wins, quick wins, and then suddenly, because it's seasonal or it goes in line with, what's happening in the economy, people then get addicted to this instant hit, and suddenly you have to manage them, or manage your stakeholders into their expectations onto a longer sales cycle. So it sounds like you're invested in that with your retention and the amount of time you spend on the funnel. So maybe talk about that sales cycle length a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. And I think expanding on that retention, I think within B2B SaaS, a lot of companies, especially as they move up market towards enterprise, they really look for more of a platform play. And a part of that is really that land and expand motion of, for example, within Auditboard, our initial engagements typically would start with the audit team. But we have this big opportunity to expand out and add on additional products with InfoSec teams, the office of the CISO, and other parts of the organization. And so to that point of having an ongoing conversation, even with our initial customers, there's another set of ICPs within organizations that we want to penetrate. And to do that, it's really having that continuous conversation and continuous surround to make sure that we're not just having that initial transaction and not just retaining, but also doing cross-sell and upsell, which helps drive our value over time. For us, we've definitely seen longer sales cycles. Our particular sales cycles can be 12 to 18 months. Buying cycles are taking longer, and decisions are starting to require more approvals. And so I think there's a role for marketing to help support progression through the funnel, to make sure that the investment at the front end and at the top of the funnel isn't being lost as things progress through the different stages.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think it's interesting when you touched upon that sort of land and expand. Does that then influence your ICP to a degree? Because if you're offering one sort of specific feature, you need to be offering that to enterprise to get the scale. But if you're offering an entire sort of portfolio of features within your SaaS, I think that's when you can open up to those SMEs who have got maybe smaller budgets, right? But they're happier to go with one player and then grow with them for all of their needs.
Yeah, and I think the beauty of land and expand is that it allows for more focused conversations and more specifically tailored messaging to a subset of the ICP, as opposed to trying to sell everything all at once. With the longer deal cycles and the additional approvals and the bigger buying committees, with that trend in B2B SaaS, I think it's very difficult to go in with a big, complex initiative and to simultaneously sell multiple stakeholders or multiple buying groups within an organization. And so taking a more concentrated approach on focusing on the buyer group where you're most likely to have the best success and the best close rates, I think is probably a good tactic, so that you're getting into the account and then you can make the platform argument to bring in other parts of the organization, as opposed to trying to do all at once.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think with those, the challenges that we've seen, particularly B2B SaaS, is when you've got those SMEs, you've got multiple stakeholders to convince, but nowhere near at the scale of enterprise, of course. And therefore the budgets aren't anywhere at that scale. So do you find that with those SMEs, although, I hear what you're saying, you want specific key messaging to sell a proposition where you can get in and then grow, but do you find that they don't have the budget for different tools to tackle everything anyway? So they're quite happy to have one SaaS that does more than one thing to sort of start with, and then you can grow the size of their package from there?
I think it depends on the company and the product, because within Auditboard, I think our product is a little bit unique in that the additional modules that we can sell into the InfoSec side of the business versus the audit side of the business, both of them are relatively high deal values and touch a big portion of the business. And so we're going after groups that do have significant budget under their controls, whereas other businesses like Ring Central, for example, their landing expand was more of like adding additional seats as opposed to adding additional modules and products. And I think if you're adding seats, it's a lot easier to sell, due to the lower price point. If you're adding yeah, if you're adding different modules to the business, that's where you really have to make the case for that incremental investment because it's going to be a substantial price increase, and it has to deliver value to the user of those particular modules. And so I think there's a little bit of a bifurcation between depending on the type of product that we're talking about.
And I suppose that's where the retention cycle is so important there because, well, you're not retaining, you're upselling, aren't you? So you've got a client, they're bought into you, but now you want to expand a different module within that. So you almost have to put them into a new marketing funnel, speaking to an existing client with different messaging about something else, right?
Yeah, and I think you have to build trust and have that conversation and progress people, even if they're within the same organization. If they're within a different buying function, you're almost starting from scratch. You have like a warm entry point, and you have an internal customer reference that can help build that trust. But you still have to prove out your value, and you still have to start from the beginning of the story and convince that other buying group that you can add value for their specific function.
And what's the most effective way you do that? Is it purely through account management and then accessing those networks, or is it with content? How do you market to those existing other stakeholders in current clients?
I think there's a couple of different ways. There's always the account management side of building one-to-one relationships and making sure that your existing buyers are seeing value, they're feeling value, and are willing to become sort of the evangelist for expanding further within the organization. Another key component of it, though, is also doing content marketing and education and trying to reach out and raise awareness and education within other buying groups within the organization so that there's continuity of messaging, and so that warm introduction that you can get from the first buying group, that the second buying group, they've actually heard of you before, they're familiar with what you do, they have some trust in that you have can provide value to them, as demonstrated through really thoughtful perspectives and content pieces that help to educate and make their lives easier. And I think combining the two is the ideal approach. I think just over relying on the account management team to overcome that without any type of air cover or support, you'll typically see a lower success rate than if you are warming up those other buying groups.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it puts the emphasis on continually marketing to existing clients, which I think is, again, a lot of people, they have the sales cycle and then people get moved into a different part of the funnel and suddenly you're no longer marketing to existing clients, which kind of negates the point you're making, where it's actually, we've almost got that's our lowest hanging fruit in some ways. So that's where we can market harder to them, but they get funneled out because segmentation is so, it's binary.
Yeah, and I think that rather than excluding sort of current customers from all marketing campaigns, the mix shifts a little bit, and so it depends a lot more on email marketing and things like weekly digest, where you're talking about upcoming events and pieces of content that are available, and adding value to the customers that you already have existing relationships with. And then I think there's the other component of account-based marketing and going after titles and personas within your customer base that are the right personas for adding additional modules. I think that's where account-based marketing and paid social can play a role in zeroing in on that portion of the account that you haven't penetrated yet and starting to open those dialogues and those conversations.
Yeah, yeah, I agree completely. Yeah, it requires such a holistic approach and all of the teams working together without treading on each other's toes, complement each other with the same messaging. It means that everyone is a marketer in the business, which is something we're always trying to encourage.
And the one of the most difficult parts in doing that is not necessarily the execution of that strategy. I think it's in making the case for that a portion of the marketing budget should be dedicated to that. As marketers, we always have to show ROI for our investment, and cross sell, upsell is typically one of the harder areas to show an ROI because the account managers and the sales team will by default typically get credit for the cross sell upsell. But what you do have to do is track the interaction points and show the influence that your email marketing or that your account based marketing had on progressing that cross sell upsell deal. Part of that might be holdout test, where on a certain set of accounts you run those plays and on a certain account you don't, so that then you can see what the incremental value is of that investment. But ultimately, marketers do need to go back to our finance teams with ROI, showing that we're being wise in how we're investing our finite resources.
Yeah, and like you say, it does come back to a little bit the length of that sales cycle, doesn't it? Because that makes the ROI justification even harder, right? But moving on a little bit, because we've touched upon there in terms of how we market to people. So much of that is content, right? And content now more than ever, is so important with everything that's happening with AI and I think as well, when you talk about longer sales cycles, it really highlights the importance of content. Do you think that content marketing that is something that SaaS marketers should be continually focused on? Is that the core principle, the base for all of their marketing? And if so, what type of content do you think is important?
Yeah, I think content plays an important role, and even with the attention on AI generative content, I think one important aspect of content is that it has to be meaningful and it has to add value. And so I don't think that's something that AI can do, generative AI can do on its own. I think you need generative AI plus some human component to really add incremental value so that the people consuming your content are actually seeing, learning something new, or being educated more about the trends within their industries, or you're adding to their arsenal and helping them advance and develop as individuals. I think there's a real danger of over reliance on generative content, as opposed to the focus on quality. I think is the critical variable in making sure that the content actually resonates with the intended audience and that it has a marketing value to it.
Yeah, 100% agree. It's AI isn't an easy fix to doing more content or doing it faster. It's how do we use it to make what we're doing better. To give you an example, something we've spoken about, and this isn't necessarily new, but we're looking at review mining, for our clients. And that's where you can use AI, because you can take 50,000 reviews that huge enterprise SaaS has, and you can use an AI to filter through all of that, digest it, spit out what people are saying, what they like about it, what they don't, and that can then influence copy. You can get the copy written then, as long as it's going through someone, a brand expert or brand ambassador from your perspective, or a product expert, or both. But that's where AI can come into content, right?
Yeah, and that's a good example of taking unstructured data that that AI is really useful for that use case of distilling the insights and the trends and the patterns within that unstructured data. I think another aspect of AI is becoming more important in certain aspects of marketing, such as chatbots, email nurture campaigns. So tools like Qualified and Reggie AI come to mind. And then AI is also being used by publishers behind the scenes, like Google and LinkedIn in particular. Facebook comes to mind as well. Are leveraging AI to help manage the targeting of the campaigns. The For marketers, that creates the black box problem of it's very difficult to QA and make sure that the models are driving a positive business result. But there's also like tremendous time savings that can come from that, so long as you're doing sampling, keeping a pulse on the KPIs, and making sure that the outcome aligns with the business result that you're trying to drive.
Yeah, agree. And I think that kind of leads into one of our final questions, talking about how SaaS marketing has changed and the trends. And what do you think, the types of changes within SaaS marketing are going to be over the next few years?
Yeah, so we've talked a little bit about generative AI. We've talked a little bit about AI being embedded within marketing tools. And so I think one other aspect is, tools are becoming better and better at identifying the marketing group, the buying group, and helping to target and go after that and build upon that. I think ABM has advanced a lot over the past few years. One big trend that I'm seeing within SaaS, though, is really, finance teams are looking for more finance teams and executive teams are looking for more accountability on their marketing investment. And so there's really been a shift from what was a focus on MQLs or even opportunities to looking at the full funnel of what is the ROI of any given marketing investment. Even if you're facing a 12 to 18 month sales cycle, there's still that question of, for dollars in, what do we get out at the end? Which raises some challenges. One of the biggest challenges is tracking the incremental value of each touch along that 12-month sales cycle, which is really, really thorny and difficult to do. And so with that, a lot of B2B businesses, their attribution and their tracking on those long sales cycles really is not going to paint a clear picture of the actual ROI. And so I think it becomes important to do things like those holdout tests of of getting supplemental data points that can show the ROI of investment in ways other than sort of that last click before the lead attribution model, which is kind of the Salesforce or HubSpot default.
Yeah, and I completely. I mean, attribution's a bugbear of most people's, right? And let alone when you're adding a long-term sales cycle and the implementation of generative AI and things like that. So, how do you share that value? How are you combating that?
One of it is to leverage platforms that can help apply data-driven multi-touch attribution models. It's not perfect, but I think that can directionally show what areas of the marketing mix are under-credited or over-credited under sort of the default last-click attribution model. I think another big way to tackle that is through that holdout test and looking at incrementality of, in the prior example, if we take a subset of opportunities and apply marketing air cover to try to accelerate those opportunities, do we see that versus a control set? And the challenge in B2B is that, especially enterprise B2B, the number of data points that you have to work with is relatively low, simply because it's not a high volume e-commerce business. And so these take some time. They take a little bit of intuition and interpretation of data signals. But ultimately, that helps to build the case when you go to your executive leadership or to finance and say, here's where we should invest, here's why we should invest, and here's what we're getting out of that investment. Because if you're not able to prove your ROI as a marketer, over time your budgets and resources will be diminished.
Agree. Can you give us the inside scoop? What are those tools you're using?
Yeah, so for multi-touch attribution, we've worked with a company called Dream Data, and so that's been really useful and really insightful. For some of the supplemental data points, working with the publishers directly, like we've had a really positive relationship with LinkedIn, and they have a lot of incrementality and lift studies that they can run on their back end that help to answer that question of what's the return on investment, particularly on campaigns that are not directly tied to top of funnel lead generation. And as I said, the holdout testing that we've done internally, I think has been very useful. And there's also the highest level indicators of metrics like the magic number and kind of more of a macro health indicators of for the entire investment that's going into sales and marketing, is it commensurate with the revenue that's being generated to drive the result that the business needs? And so you could start at the very high level as a health check for the overall sales and marketing organization, and then use additional tools to help drill down further and further to help quantify the impact of specific programs, specific vendors.
Wow, brilliant. That was incredibly insightful. Thank you, Richard. We packed a lot into that.
Great. Thank you.
I really appreciate your time, and I think everyone got a lot out of it as well, so I hope they all enjoyed it too. Yeah, thanks again. It's a pleasure speaking to you.
Yeah, yourself as well. Thank you.